Hello, my name is Farnoz, and I'm going to present effects of past interactions on user experience with recommended documents. I did this work with Ahmed Abdallah, Susan Dumay, and Orson Shu while I was an intern at Microsoft Research. Recommender systems are used everywhere, in e-commerce, news, social media, entertainment, and so on, and they are mostly employed to help users discover new content. Another domain where recommender systems are used is the domain of documents, in which the primary concern is to help users refine and access their own documents, and discovery of new content is of secondary importance. This is a relatively underexplored area, and the few studies that exist in this domain focus on the accuracy of the algorithm behind the scenes. The algorithm is an important component of system, but the effectiveness of the whole recommender system and the experience depends on other factors as well. These factors include the presentation of the documents, the explanations given for why such documents are recommended, and users' interaction with the documents, and so on. In this work, we focus on users' experience and interaction with recommended documents. Because users and their collaborators are likely to have had previous interactions with documents recommended to them, how much they recognize these documents and how useful they find the documents to be may depend on these past interactions. Specifically, we investigate the effects of three aspects of interaction with documents on users' recognition of, interest in, and intent to open the documents in the near future. The aspects of interaction that we study are users' recency of access to documents recommended to them, users' richness of prior interaction with the documents, and displaying prior interactions of the user and their collaborators as a summary on the document tile. To answer these questions, we developed a platform where users could interact with the documents in their cloud repository. After a participant consented to the study and logged into our platform would request the participants 100 most recently touched documents and the history of past interactions for each. The interactions could be actions such as opening, editing, commenting, etc., and they could be performed by the user or whoever else had access to the document. These 100 documents were the output of an earlier stage of an actual document recommender system that, from all the documents that the user had access to, selects a few to recommend to the user. So in that sense, this wasn't just an arbitrary set, but rather candidates for actual recommendation. And then from these 100 documents, we selected a subset to present to the user one at a time, and we asked a few questions for each. So how did we select the subset? We were interested in the effects of recency of access and richness of interaction. So first we partitioned users' documents into 4 recency of access conditions. The 4 partitions were documents that had been accessed in the last 24 hours by the user, the ones that were accessed in the last week, longer ago, and the ones that were never accessed. And the partitions for richness of interaction included documents that the participant had no interaction with, those that they had only ever opened, and those that the user had contributed to at some point in the past, for example by editing or commenting. This matrix gives us 7 partitions. The grayed out cells don't exist. And for each participant, we randomly selected 4 documents from each partition, or fewer because not everybody had 4 in all their partitions. The numbers that you see in the table are the distribution of the documents that we selected for a study across all our participants. Then we randomly split the documents in each partition and assigned half to be displayed with a basic presentation and the other half to be displayed with an advanced presentation. On the basic document tile, we would show only the basic properties of the document. Document type, title, author, location, and who, if anyone, has shared it with the user. On the advanced document tile, in addition to the basic properties, we would show a summary of the recent interactions of the user and their collaborators, which included recent edits and comments, and those mentions and replies that the user had been involved in. Before beginning the study, participants would go through an example that explained the various parts of the document tile. The participants would experience a block of documents in one presentation condition, followed by a block of documents in the other. For each document, we asked the following questions. Do you recognize the document? Yes or no? And we also told participants that we're interested in how long it took them to recognize the document, and that they should click on either yes or no as soon as they've made up their mind. If the user said that they did recognize the document, then we would follow up with another question asking if they had a prior intent to open the file in the near future. If they said that they did not have the intent or if they did not recognize the file, then we would ask if they were interested in accessing the file now that they have seen it. In addition to yes/no answers, we asked for elaborations. The dataset of the documents in our study consisted of more than 1,600 documents from more than 100 participants. Now I'm going to discuss the results. The outcome measures that I'll talk about are recognition ratio, which is out of all the documents that the participants saw, what ratio they recognized, recognition time, how long it took them to decide if they recognized the document or not, intent to open ratio, which we only consider for those documents that the user did recognize because those were the subset that we asked this question for, and interest to access, for those documents that the user either did not recognize or did recognize but did not have a prior intent to open. We found that recency of access did have a significant effect on both recognition ratio and recognition time. The more recent a user's access to a document was, the more likely they were to recognize the document, and they took less time to do so. Interestingly, users recognized documents that they had never opened more than 45% of the time. We analyzed their free text responses to understand why that was happening. We found that sometimes users knew about documents from outside channels. As one participant says, they knew about a document from a hallway conversation. Another reason was that sometimes users had seen a document before, but they had deferred opening it to a later time. Now let's see the effect of recency of access on our other outcome measures. Users were more likely to have the intent to open more recent documents compared to older ones, but interestingly, it was the older documents or the ones that they had never opened that piqued their interest more. Reasons for this interest included sometimes users knew about a document but needed to be reminded, or that they had lost the document in the cloud, or that they wanted to know about the recent changes. This interest sometimes came from the information related to the content, and sometimes had to do with other people who collaborated on the document. Now let's see what role richness of prior interaction plays. The more involved a participant's prior interaction with the document was, the more likely they were to recognize the document and in a shorter time. Users were also more likely to intend to open documents with which they had more involved interactions, but they were more interested in those that they had never opened or had only ever opened without contributing to them. Reasons for these patterns were similar to what we discussed for recency of access. Now on to the presentation of interactions. Surprisingly, presentation did not affect recognition ratio. It did affect recognition time, but that was expected because the advanced presentation simply had more text on the document tile to read and parse. Presentation did not affect users' prior intent to open documents, and that is expected as well. This is prior intent and should not be impacted by the immediate presentation. But presentation didn't affect interest either. We were surprised to see that presentation did not affect recognition. Analyzing participants' free text responses indicated that title and author were the most cited cues for what helped them recognize a document. It could also be that our presentation did not have the right granularity to be of help. We did not have access to the content of the documents, so we couldn't show summaries like you added this particular section. Some responses, however, indicated that viewing the summary could be useful, as can be seen here. Our study showed that users were interested in two types of recommendations. In some cases, they knew about a document and needed to get back to it. In this case, the recommendations helped them revisit known items more effectively. In other cases, they were not aware of the document, but the information on the document tile intrigued them to access it. This finding suggests that document recommendation systems should support both refining known items and discovery of new ones, and has implications for designing ranking algorithms that can support both scenarios. This concludes the talk. Thanks for listening.